welcome to today's session from Combined Knowledge. Are your apps in a good form? Now there's a bit of a pun intended there in the title. We are going to be going through Power Apps, specifically Canvas apps, and how we can create useful but also very customized form controls within our Canvas Power Apps. Now, I'm a big fan of form controls within Power Apps. A number of different reasons for that, and we're going to be going through those in today's session. So just a quick intro into what we're going to be covering in today's session then. So we're going to be looking at several different areas within Microsoft Power Apps, Canvas apps, and the form controls. We're going to look at understanding what they are, how they work. We're going to start at the basics. The different properties and things that come along with them, and then we're going to start customizing them and unlocking them and trying to make them conform to what we expect to be happening as opposed to what the form is dictating to us. And then once we've got together and understand how all of those items come together, we can then start making more customizations, making bespoke forms, even utilizing hidden forms within our Power Apps. So we're going to be looking at unlocking and customizing our forms and our cards, creating and linking bespoke forms and hidden forms, and then what do we do if we have a scenario where forms is not an option, and that's where we will have our patch function come into play. Now, for those of you that have joined us on today's session, again, thank you very much for joining us, and I do apologise for the technical delay we had at the beginning. If you do manage to stay around for the entire session, we will be having our usual name in the hat prize draw for a £50 Amazon voucher, and that is obviously in good time with it being Black Friday and coming up to close to Christmas, so you could maybe bag yourself a couple of bargains there on today's session. So do stick around towards the end, and I will let you know how you can put your name into the hat for that. Just a kind of prerequisite on that, there is no marketing involved with any of that. It's simply a case of who's listening and who is around at the end of the session to put their name into the hat for that one. And then we'll do the prize draw immediately after the session, and you'll be contacted on email if you are the lucky winner. So just a bit of an overview about myself. My name is Simon Great. I've been with Combined Knowledge now for about 2.5 years, and I am a Microsoft certified trainer. So I specialise in Power Apps, Power Automate, and particularly the technical side of the Power Platform. But as you can see from the top of the slide there, I have a number of different accolades to my name, Microsoft exams that I've passed that enable me to teach these items as subjects. So again, if you are looking into any of the Power Apps or Power Platform exams from Microsoft, which would consist of the PL 900, the PL 100, as well as I believe the 200 might be on there as well. Do check out our website. We do have lots of open seats coming up in the future for sessions around that. And again, do check out our website for up and coming events as well as up and coming training. In the next few weeks, we're actually going to be doing a winter workshop, as it were, for a number of different subjects. We've got AI Builder, Model Driven Apps, and Power FX. So essentially, these are short either half a day or full day workshops where we'll be going through those particular subjects. We're concentrating on either AI Builder, Power FX, or on model driven apps, and basically giving a kind of a high level overview as well as diving into how we might need to start using these items. So if you've ever wondered how these items might work but you don't have the time to commit to a full training session around these subjects, then do check those out. Like I said, they'll be happening in the next couple of weeks or so, and we'll be running them again in the new year if you're not available for those as well. So again, check out our website. Now, we've been running this feedback session for quite a while now, and we've got a number of different videos in our series. So once we have finished recording today's session, we'll be tidying up the video files, etc., and then putting them onto our YouTube channel. So again, do check out our YouTube channel for the previous videos from our feedback series. And particularly in the last few months, we've been quite technical. We've been doing some technical things. In fact, if you did join us for the previous webinar where we were deep diving into a case study around some consultancy work that we did for a customer, you might recognize one of the items I'm going to be kind of diving back into again today, because it perfectly examines exactly what we're trying to show off in today's session. So without all of that out of the way now, we can now get into the reason why we're here. So as we know, for building our Power Apps, there are lots of different intricate controls available to us. There's lots of different ways we can get started. Typically, one of the most common or most popular that I at least come across is that with SharePoint and Power Apps. So in that case, Power Apps is a way of making a process easier, much quicker for enabling not just mobile users but also desktop users being able to interact with our data source, our SharePoint lists, much easier. And so one of the most versatile controls that we can utilize in that scenario, and any scenario really that connects to a data source, is the form control, which is the focus for today's session. So the form control then is special for a few reasons. One, it actually has nested controls built within it. So what that means is all the other different types of controls that we typically use within our Power Apps, we place an individual control upon to our screen. However, just like a gallery control, a form control actually brings multiple controls into this screen itself. So when we add in a form control, we need to instruct it to connect to a data source. Now, unlike a gallery control will list a number of different items. A form control will only link to a single record. So what this means is if you've got a big long list of information in SharePoint or Dataverse or a SQL database, wherever your data is stored, you are going to need to tell the form which item in your data source you are interested in looking at, interested in manipulating. So the form control, like I said, brings across a number of different controls onto our screen, but we need to instruct it not only on the data source that it is partnered with, but also the item that we need to instruct our users to edit. So the form control actually needs a bit of support. Unlike a gallery control where we can just simply point it towards a data source and have that information shown off in a nice and very aesthetically pleasing way, or a data table, again showing off lots of data from our data source, a replicating item throughout our screen. Our form control needs instruction. We need to tell it which individual record we need to point that to. And this seems to be one of the biggest issues that we see, particularly for people new to Power Apps. They've got their galleries, they've got their form control, but how do I instruct it? How do I connect that up? And we'll be looking at that in a moment. So what can we do with our form controls? Well, forms actually come in two different controls. We have a view control and we also have an edit control. Now, the edit control will actually allow us to view, but the view control will not allow us to edit. So essentially what that means is if you want to view information, you can either use the view control or the edit form control. But if you do intend to have your users edit the information or add information, then you're going to want to use the edit form control. And again, we'll be looking at that in just a moment of time. One of the reasons why these types of controls are particularly useful is because they are a wizard-like. Now, one of the big draws to Power Apps is the low code or to no code option that we have available to us. Essentially, less is more. The less I have to code, the better and easier it is for me to use. So we have a wizard-like help available to us within our form control. This allows us to quickly, and that's the key part there, quickly and easily grab our fields or columns, whatever they're called in our data source, depends on which data source you look at, depending on their name. They're all essentially the same thing, field or column. It will grab all of the information it needs to operate and place all of those controls onto our screen. Now, this speeds up the process significantly for us, because not only does it add a control for us to interact with that data, it also adds in all of the supporting controls as well. So for example, we'll have our label. The label will indicate the name of our control, and then if our field is mandatory, it'll also add in all of the support controls for facilitating informing our user that this is a mandatory control. We don't have to do anything. We just simply instruct the wizard on which control or which fields we want to add in. So let's jump in and have a quick look at how all of that works, and what are you talking about, Simon? So what we're actually going to start off looking at is a SharePoint list. So here we've got a couple of different SharePoint lists, just standard stuff at the moment, mainly text columns, etc. But essentially we've just got a couple of types of lists detailing different information. So we've got a visitor parking list here, and we've also got a product list, just a list of products from our Power BI course that I've stolen this from. And as a lot of you will be aware, we can quickly create a Power App based on either of these lists from within SharePoint itself. And what this allows us to do, just going to create a quick Power App, and then while it's loading, I'll talk over it. So we'll call this one Product List version 1 and click Create. So what this is going to do, Power Apps is actually going to go away now, and it's going to build my form for me. It's going to build my screens. Now this is going to build a CRUD app, a create, read, update and delete. And all of those actions are ones that we're going to want to perform on a regular basis. So what we're actually going to see in this this basic app is both versions of the form that we were just talking about a few moments ago. So Power Apps has created my my app now, and we can see all of the different elements working together. So if we scroll down on the left hand side, we've got our tree view, we've got our details screen and our edit screen. Now what happens in all of these pre-generated apps or rendered apps, or however you want to call them, these template apps, essentially what will happen is when I interact with the initial screen, the browse screen, it's going to direct me to the relevant screen. So in this case, whenever I click on any of the items on my app, it's going to take me to the details screen. So let's click play, and let's click onto our first item here at the top. This has taken us through to the details screen. So on the details screen, if we just close the preview down, this is where we've been directed to. If we open this up, we have our detail form control. So this detail form control allows us to directly look at our data source, and based upon the item that I've selected, view all of that information. So unlike our gallery control, if we just click back and have a look at that a second, where we can see lots of records, but obviously our space is quite important, so we can only show minimal information about that singular record. If I want to see more, and this is a fairly intuitive action, if I want to see more information about something, most users understand that I need to click on it to see more information. That's exactly what happens. We click on the item and we go through to a page where we see more information. Now this is where our first form control comes in, our detail form, our view form control, and yeah, essentially we can list all of the information we want to then show that user in a more information type scenario. So all of this information is being pulled directly from our data source in SharePoint. So all of the information that is listed here is now available in my data source. Now this isn't actually every single column we have available. Some of the columns linked to both Dataverse and SharePoint are going to be system columns, columns that are used by that data source to make sure that we are you know, getting the best out of that data source. Who modified it last? When was it created? System type information, that historical information that we'll need to refer back to later on. we're not interested in that at this moment in time. Or at least Power Apps, when it created this app, has determined I'm not interested in it. However, maybe I am. Maybe I need to see more information about the actual record itself, as well as the information or the custom columns that we've created, as you can see here. Now, if I wanted to edit this information, so say I'm in a scenario where I am editing the product information we have in our product list, I would need to click onto the edit icon just up here at the top. Now this has changed. Although the titles have remained more or less in the same place, I can now interact with the fields. So whereas before I couldn't actually change any of the information, I'm clicking around on the screen, not much is changing, I can now actually select into the fields and start making changes. I can then even save my changes back to my data source. So essentially what's going on here is we're being pushed over to a new screen. So if we close down our preview, we're now on the edit screen, and the edit screen is where we have our edit form instead. So this form allows us to edit information. So there's the two types of forms, and you might be sat there thinking, well, okay, that's great, Simon, but how are you getting the record into that form? Now this comes down to the forms properties. So the forms properties are quite important. Just like all our other controls, we have a series of properties that are shared amongst all of the controls, such as fill and visible, etc. But a lot of the controls have their own unique properties as well, and the form controls are no different here. So the form properties that we have that are of interest or of note at this point are data source, item, default mode, columns, layout, on success, on reset, and on failure. Now there are a few more, but these are the ones that are most important when we're getting started, when we're trying to understand and make the best of our forms within our Power Apps. So data source, this one speaks for itself. What list of information, what connection are you referencing? And as we can see from our Power App here, we're referencing our products list, which is available from our data source over here on the left hand side. So in order to connect our form up to our data source, we'll then need to add that data. We'll need to add that connection into our SharePoint list or our Dataverse or the tables, etc., or any other maybe potentially even premium connectors out to SQL. Whatever we're connecting to here, if it is a data source that stores tabular data, we can connect our galleries and also our forms up to that. Now this is the one that that kind of trips people over the most, and that is item. So I've connected my form up to my data source, which enables me to create the fields that I want my users to either see or interact with. But how do I instruct the form when the users are interacting with it, which record to edit? And this is the one that trips people over the most when they're starting to get to grips with custom forms, not utilizing what has been created for them, but creating their own apps in their own scenarios. And it's the item property that we need to focus on here. Now, this item property essentially needs to be an identifier in that list of information. So what we can do here is we can reference to our gallery controls, and that's exactly what's going on in the generated app that Microsoft created for us earlier on. So if we go back over to our browse screen, we've got our gallery just here in the middle. We can select that so we can see it, and this is a kind of a keynote. In our property at the top of the screen, it says items, the plural of item. So here we have the items that we want our gallery to show, but obviously for our form we're going to show a single item. So that denotes the purpose and intention for the different types of control. Now what I can do from here is I have my browse gallery one, and when I select a particular item, so let's go on to Boggle here, click on that one, that's the one I want to edit. So how is the form doing that? How is it understanding that that's going on? Well, if we select our form, and we've got it selected just over here on the left, detail form, we've got our data source listed. If we go to item, we now have the reference back to our gallery. So what we're doing here is we're saying browse gallery one dot selected. So look at the gallery control, take the record from that gallery control and display that information in my form. Now, because both of them are connected to exactly the same data source, it means it understands which record you are interested in viewing or editing, etc. So that is one of the most common issues that users have when creating their own bespoke forms. They're not entirely sure how to line up the galleries or the data tables with the forms. So what you need is to reference the control that you are selecting and then grab that information. And just to kind of back that up a little bit, if we go back to our browse gallery, you'll notice that on the onSelect action from all of the controls listed inside of a gallery, we have select parent. That's essentially instructing the gallery that I'm the one that is being selected. Please inform the control that this is the item, this is the record that is being selected, and then subsequently our form is then going to be instructed to change. Now there are a number of different ways in which we can use this connection between our controls as well. So if we just quickly move over to another Power App that we've got. So we've gone ahead and created another variant of our product list app here. And as you can see on the left hand side, we've got 4 screens with all different purposes. But the screen that we've got available to us here is a screen containing both a gallery and a form. So not all the time are we going to be wanting to use a app that is on a very small screen. The generated apps from SharePoint and other data sources will always come in a mobile format. What happens if you want to have the same items but in a tablet or widescreen format? We'd have to create them ourselves. And typically what is a scenario that we want to follow is that we have both a gallery and a form on the same screen. That's exactly what we've got going on here. So we have our gallery over on the left and our form over on the right. Now the form at the moment is in read-only mode. So what that means is all of the items that I select from the left-hand side, let's click play, it's updating that information. So I'm showing the information off, but none of that information is editable. I can't click on any of it. I can't select or change any of it. If I want to edit an item, I need to switch to an edit form, and that is via the edit item here. And this is where the next property comes in, default mode. So our forms, like I said, there are 2 types of control. We've got a view form and we've also got an edit form. Typically it's going to be the edit form that you're going to want to use because it's a lot more versatile. But both of them have a default mode, and this default mode is essentially the mode in which the form is going to start its life out. When the app is running for the first time, when the app is being launched, how is my form going to be interpreted by my users? So another problem that we come across is that we're adding a form onto our screen and I want to interact with it. I click play to see everything in motion and my screen's blank. Let's have a quick look at what I mean there. So we go over to our app. Let's create a quick screen. So we've got screen number 1 down here, and essentially I'm going to put on a gallery. Let's connect that up to our data source, so product list. Let's just move it out of the way a little bit, and then let's add in our form. So here we've got our edit and display forms. We're going to want to use the edit form because we want to edit this information later on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to new, just for now. This is our default mode. So for my data source, again, I need to line it up to my product list. And this is where it goes ahead and it looks at the list of information and goes, right, you've got this column, you've got that column, I'm going to add all of these in for you. And we'll come back to what we need to do if they're not quite what we want later on. And I'm going to instruct my form to look at my new gallery. So my new gallery is called gallery 2. And then I go to my item and I go gallery 2 dot selected. So gallery 2 dot selected is now my item. If I click play, it's now going to update my gallery 2. But when I press play, it's blank. That is because of the default mode. So depending on what mode the form is set to will depend upon what interaction our users are going to have. Now this isn't ideal because I don't want to have extra controls on the screen just to have a view form, to have an edit form, and to have even a new form, because for every form I create I'm going to have buttons and supporting controls around that to control that form. So what can I do? This is where we can manipulate the default mode of our the display mode, sorry, of our form control. So if we go into our Power App again and go back to our previous screen, here we've got our product screen, and that's exactly what we've got going on here. We've got our edit form just here, and we know it's an edit form because we've got the little pen icon on our form. And my default mode is view, which is exactly what we're seeing here. But when I click on an item and I want to make a change, I want to change that to be editable. So I've got an edit button just here, and when I press edit, it changes and converts the form into a form in which I can edit now. So I'm not having to move from screen to screen. I'm not having to create extra screens with extra controls. I can do everything from the same screen that I'm currently on. Now notice on the left hand side, currently I've actually grayed out the left hand side to prevent me from making changes, not saving them, and then clicking onto another item and then losing those changes. We've also got a couple of buttons at the bottom. We've got cancel changes and we've got save changes. Now all of these interactions, all of these repercussions are being controlled by this display mode or mode of my form. So if I press cancel, it will reset everything back to what it was. I can go ahead and select another item. So we've got Game of Thrones here, or zombie dice, and again I can click edit and I can start editing that item. So let's just put in edited just to prove that that's changing. Click save. That will then save my item. Zombie dice has now been edited and everything has reset back to where it was. Great stuff. So how is that all working? So like I said, this is all based around that default and display mode. It's all about that interaction our app users are going to have. So by default, I want the form to be in view mode, but I need to instruct the form to change whenever I am interacting with different buttons. So the first one is our edit button. So the edit button on the onSelect property, so the trigger property, let's find where it is. This is running the function edit form. So edit form and the form's name as the parameter will essentially say to the form called form1, I need you to change into edit mode. So can you change it into edit mode, please? And it simply switches. It changes from view over to edit. Now what I'm doing here, notice that some of the buttons have disappeared, other controls have changed. I'm referencing that form control and I'm asking it what its current status is. Are you in view only mode? Are you in edit mode? Etc, etc. So down here on my cancel button, if we go through to the visible control, that's exactly what we're doing here. Essentially we've got it's not even an if statement, it's simple check of a value. We have the form1.displayMode equals edit. So if form1's display mode equals edit, so remember the button at the top here is informing the form to change to edit, then I will display. If it's a true value, then I will display. We've also got the same on our save changes form button. Where is the visible option? There it is, exactly the same option there. And then on our gallery, what we've actually got is a rectangle. Now this rectangle is blocking my path. I cannot get to my gallery control. So essentially what I've done here is I'm looking at the gallery to say if the gallery is set to disabled, show my visibility. Now this just is another control in the way to prevent me from accidentally clicking away and going onto a different item. So if we just collapse that down for a second, and this is what my gallery actually looks like. I still can't click on anything, because on the galleries display mode, so again this is a property that's very common amongst other controls as well. So understanding how this works for our forms means that we can use this in other locations and on other controls as well. But what we've got going on here is if form 1's display mode equals edit, then I want my display mode to be disabled. So when I press the edit button and switch the form with the edit form function, the gallery in question is actually going to switch itself off. It disables itself, again preventing that access. But the actual change aesthetically isn't too obvious. So I've put a rectangle in the way and kind of added on a fill color. If we just select that, that has a percentage on the transparency on the alpha. So it's obvious that it's been disabled. Again, this is all about a journey for our users to go through. So with all that in place, what we have is a single screen that contains both our gallery and a form that can not only view but also edit our data from our data source. And again, the item property is important here for our form because it is referencing to the gallery on the other screen. Now, what happens if we have to split across multiple screens? If I have my gallery on one screen, but then I also have my my form on another. So if we go over to my product screen too, it's basically a duplicate, but we've got a different interaction going on here. So here we've got our gallery showing and displaying lots of nice information. It's nice and easy to use. We've got images from our data source, or links to images at least, and we've got some information. So if I want to view more information, again, just like we had in our scenario from earlier on, the generated app, here we've got our edit form in view mode displaying our information. And again, we can demonstrate that because it's got the little pen icon and it says edit at the top here. So we've got our edit form now. Now this time on our item, we actually have a variable. We don't have gallery2.selected. We have a variable. Now the reason for this is when we are referencing a control on another screen, it's going to load all of the controls on that screen as well. Now if we've just come from that place, that's not too bad. We've already loaded most of the controls, that's fine. But if we're referencing a control in another location we've not been to yet, it will need to load all of the controls, not just that single control, because there might be dependencies. It might be that that control has its own links and references to other controls, so it needs to load everything. That can mean we can slow things down a little bit. So in this scenario, I'm not using gallery2.selected, I'm using var selected product. And back to my gallery on the previous screen, or gallery1_1, instead of just selecting parent, this time on select we have a set function, and this set function is setting our variable var selected product to this item. I'm not doing this item.id, I'm not doing this item.name, I'm not putting a singular piece of information in there, I'm putting a whole record into there. I'm putting all of the records information in there. Now what this means later on is that I can display this information in other locations as well. So if I was to put onto our edit screen, for example, outside of the form, if I was to put a label onto the screen, let's put it at the top here, I could do var selected product, and then I can, as it says here, it's a record, it's not a singular value. I need to instruct it what information I want from it. I do full stop, and then I can pull out the information from that record. So I could do name. Now what that means is we could use this for other information as well, or other controls. So we could put on an image control, for example. Let's put that over here on the left, and I can do var selected product dot game URL. So I can actually show the image from the gallery without actually doing any lookups, doing any callbacks to my data source. I'm referencing that variable, which is much quicker. But also because it contains then the unique identifier to identify that record back in my data source, the form also understands what's going on as well. So this is just an easier way of reducing the impact on our form and our app overall. We're not having to load controls from other screens. We're simply looking at that variable, that global variable available to all screens. And it also means that if we have other controls that change that variable value, it doesn't matter in the logic of things, because everything is referencing that variable as opposed to a controls value, so gallery1_1, which means if I need to for some reason manipulate or select a different record for whatever reason on my edit screen, as we see here, I would have to somehow interact with the gallery and change that record, or set up some logic on the item property for my form control. I'd have to set up some logic there, whereas using a variable instead, I simply change the variable and then direct users back to this screen. So this screen has now become multifunction. I don't need to have a screen set up for every intended use. If I wanted to edit all but one piece of information, I could instruct it that way, but I could then also use the form later on for other uses as well. And again, we've got the same interactions here. We've got our edit item button. This is simply changing the value of edit form 1_2, which is this one. If we click on that one, edit form 1_2, this is changing its display mode from view to edit. So now again, my buttons are dependent upon that control as well. So if we go to visible, these are also doing exactly the same. They will only display when the form is in the right mode. Again, this is also you can also, instead of using visible, we can simply take this out, turn that to true. We could also do this on the display mode of the button as well. So if we go up to display mode, we have edit, and the display mode is available from the right hand side over here as well. But what we could also do is if our display mode for our form equals edit, then we want display mode dot edit. Otherwise, we want it to be disabled. There we go. So now what will happen when we play our app, if I cancel my changes, my save button's there, but my users can't interact with it. There's nothing they can do. They know there is something there that they can do. There's a dependent action. It's obvious because, oh, this button is disabled. How do I activate this button? Click edit, and now my button has been activated. So we can use this display mode property of our form to set off and control other controls around our form, our app as well. Let's have a look at what's the next one on the list. Yes, we also have, when we're building our forms up, we can link them to our data source, but we also have the need to actually interact with our controls, our card controls. So when we're adding in our forms, we're instructed by our wizard to select the fields we want to use. Which fields do you want to use? How do you want them to be displayed? Now, these cards are essentially containers. They contain the mandatory icon, they contain the labels, they contain everything pertaining to that field. That's great, but we've only got limited control, unfortunately, over these. And as a result, that means if we want to do anything special or different or contradictory to our data source, and there's a few reasons why we want to do that, then we need to unlock them. We'll look at that in a second. But one important thing to note, and again, this is an item that pops up on a regular basis, is they are not dynamic. So although we are connected to our data source for our form, the cards contained, the controls that we build, are not active. They're not constantly changing with our data source. Now what I mean by that is I mean the column structure. So if I was to go into our data source for our product list, for example, let's go over to the product list and go into the settings for our product list. As you can see, none of my columns are required, but I need information to be in the form when a user submits it. At the minute, they can submit blank records. That's not ideal. So what I can do is come into here and say the description. The description needs to be completed. So I'll come in and require that this column contains information. It's now a mandatory column. If I was going to add this in directly into SharePoint, it would only allow me to do that providing that I completed the description just here. So if I press save, I need to enter in a description. Again, users fully understand this. But if I go back over to my Power App and go back to my form, what we'll actually see now, let's go to the full screen. Click cancel, add new item. Oh, he says. There we go. This one's working. Minimum age is actually mandatory, but description isn't. Why is that? That's because it doesn't update the form with the data source. Although the data changes and it's dynamic in that sense, the actual underlying structure, the controls themselves, don't change. So what will happen then if I was to put in a value for everything except for description and except for minimum age? So I press save and I've got errors. I've got errors and I've been sent off to a new screen. Now the reason I've been sent off to a new screen is because we're not handling those errors correctly either, and we'll come back to that one in a little bit of time. So let's go add. For now, what we will do on the on select is we're just gonna comment that out so that we don't keep getting fired off into the wrong location. So let's try that again. Nothing in description, nothing in players, and click save. Minimum age is required. Okay, I'm going to fill that one out. Click save and blank. So what's happened? Let's go see if my record has actually been placed into our data source. Let's go back here. Let's refresh. Let's scroll down. So we've got another record that's been added in because we weren't instructed that this is a mandatory column. So the description isn't there. It's mandatory. We need that value, but it's been sent to the data source anyway. This isn't ideal. So how do we fix this? Now, firstly, we need to make sure we refresh the data source. This reconnects to the data source and updates all of the information. What we actually need to do after that, if we do it on the right place, there you go, refresh that one, is we'll need to re-add this item in. So if I select my form and go to the Edit Fields button over here on the right, here are a list of my cards. So my cards are available on the left hand side as well. We can see all of the cards, quite long convoluted names in many cases, so a bit tricky to understand what's going on. But we can rely on this card system we've got for our fields over here. And for my description, I need to remove it. Now sometimes this can take a little bit of time to filter through from your data source, so you might need to just refresh it or give it a go a couple of times. But basically we re-add the description. So we're not removing it from the data source, we're only removing it from the form itself. And then we can come across later on and we can reorder it. And as we can see, it's still not saying that that one is mandatory. So let's give it another refresh. Add that in. And again, sometimes it does take a little bit of time to come through. So let's remove that. In fact, what we'll do is we'll close our app just for speed, and then we will open that up again. Oh, too many clicks. So just for speed, sometimes this is a quicker way of refreshing it. So now if we go back to our form, we can do it from here actually. We've got our description. Let's select this one, edit fields, remove our column or field that we want to add back in, and hopefully it should now come through with the icon. It has not yet come through. So yes, it does take a little bit of time, unfortunately, to come through, but that will add in with a property called required set to true. So what happens if we want to actually make a column mandatory, but we can't affect our data source? So say I don't have the privilege of being able to go in and say I need to set description to mandatory or title or unit cost. How do we actually do that easily? Well, one of the easiest ways, again through our forms, is what we actually saw earlier on the minimum age column on our other form, is that we need to first unlock our cards. So we can customize some of the options for our cards if we go on edit fields. So for example, I've got my product category. I don't want people to type into the categories because they're set. I don't want them to be deviated from. I need the product categories to be set. But again, I can't change my data source. I can't change that to a choice column. It has to stay as a text column for a number of reasons. If we go on to our product category, we can unlock our card. Now, when we unlock our card, if you notice on the left-hand side, we can't actually select anything. We've got this little padlock icon. I can't affect many of the properties. I can't affect any of the complex properties that we've got available. So I can't change the text. It's grayed out. I can't change the what's a value that we've got that we can see. I can't change the visible. Everything is linked to the card itself. So what I need to do is unlock this. So I unlock with the padlock. This is not a changeable event either. Once you do this and save your app, you can't undo this. You'd have to remove and re-add in your field again via the edit fields for your form. And if we click on that, this will actually demonstrate what's changed. Notice now that our text data types, our number data types, our other data types are still there, but our product category is now custom. This means I don't have any control from the actual editor itself. I can't change the options that are available. Now, if I wanted to convert product category into a drop-down box, what I could do is, if we start the process again, let's add in the category. There it is, product category. It's going to add it to the bottom, so scroll down. Let's just drag it up to the top so it's a little bit more where it should be. Now, again, it's been added back in as text. It's a text column, but I want to control what people can do. So what I need to do is change this to, I've got the right one selected, yep. Change this to allowed values. So allowed values creates a drop-down box. Great stuff. All I need to do is instruct my drop-down box on the items, again, just like in our gallery, a list of information. But I can't, it's locked. I need to unlock the card again. So now the card is unlocked, I can now affect these values. And what I can basically do from here is I've got a function from earlier on that I created, and essentially I've got a table of information, a hard-coded table. It's not coming from my data source. I've put this in myself, and now my users can select from the drop-down the relevant category. This means that my data source is going to be updated consistently, but and easily, but I haven't had to change the column type. I haven't had to put in a choice column. I haven't been able to affect that because it's maybe a legacy list for other things or another data source. So this is a way of me taking control of the form. The form does a lot of the work, but it's limited on what I can change. So unlocking the form will allow me, the card within the form will allow me to affect those changes. And just like we saw earlier on, got a bit of an error there now actually. We need to change that to one of my values. There we go. Great stuff. One of the values for our card, if we select our card on the left, is required. So if I change this from false to true, it will now display the star. So much faster than what I was trying to do earlier on with the description. I can actually specify whether or not this is a mandatory field or not by unlocking my card. If I unlock the players and then go into required and then changing this to true. So I can manipulate what information is definitely going to be sent back to my my data source, my SharePoint list. So now if I go to, let's cancel these changes. Let's add a new item. For some reason that's not working. Oh, I haven't even set it up. So just like we have for our edit form, in order to change a form into a new form, which will insert a record into our data source, we need to use the function new form. And again, we give it the name of the form. And I assume that that's the right one. It's highlighted in green. And then when we click add new item, it clears everything and we've got a new form that we complete. And if I press save, it will give us the same errors as we saw earlier on as well. So those cards are pretty critical. They are what allow us to interact with this data, whether it be in a supported type or not. Another example of why you might want to switch from one control type to another is maybe, for example, we've got the number of players. The number of players column is a number column, so it's free number column. We can type that in. Yes, on our column here, we can specify that it be a number value only. So that, again, that's another reason why you might want to do that. Or you may want to change it to, again, another drop down that has the numbers displayed. All depends on the interaction you want your users to have as well. So another aspect of our forms is that those control cards, those cards that we have, allow us to quickly add and link up new fields from our data source. If I was to add a field into my data source, I would need to load my app up, edit the fields and add that in. Again, they're not dynamic. They don't change with the data source. And as we saw a moment ago, my data source was still not loading the description, wasn't it? Wherever it is. There it is at the bottom. So we can delete that from our form. We can try and add that back in now, see if that's going to come through. And doesn't look like it's come through just yet. It might be because we have some pending records in there that need to be dealt with. Let's remove this one. There you go, it's been removed. But yeah, we'd need to add that back in. So the cards can have some customization to them. If we go on to the edit fields button, we can customize certain items for certain data types. So if we had a choice column, we'd have fewer options. But if we want to completely control the interaction for our users, we would need to go to the advanced tab and then select the unlock property. This would enable us for that card, just that card, to customize all of the options, including its required status, which field it updates, and where it gets the information from as well. Now, what happens if we can't use a form to complete our action? This is where the patch operation comes in. So forms are great. I love forms. I think they're very versatile. But what happens if I have a scenario where I can't update using a form? Now, one scenario that is just like that is a gallery control. So we've got a screen created just here that has a gallery control on it, and forms are not supported inside of a gallery. as you can imagine, adding a form into every single item of a gallery could add an extraordinary high number of controls to a screen, and so it is not a supported option. However, there are going to be certain situations where a gallery is going to make more sense than creating forms for items. So what we've got here, we've got our product list again, and I've got this little toggle at the top, and I've got all my items listed here for my data source, and this toggle enables me to see customization options. So from here we can see the product category for each of our items. So we've got deck building here, trading card game, and modern games and stuff like that, as well as the image URL. So at the minute the image URL for this item is just there over on the left hand side, but what if I wanted to change that? If I wanted to change that quickly, or if there's a scenario where I need to toggle options on for lots of options, a form wouldn't be an ideal solution for that. Maybe I just want to update a single item from a single button or a single toggle. What would I use? That's where patch comes in. So patch is a function that can be used with either data sources or collections within the app itself. And essentially what we need to do is instruct it on the data source that we're going to be updating, which record, and then the information. So the name of the column and where are we getting that data from. This is quite a manual process. You have to do a lot of linking up. The form, however, does all of this for us. We point the form at the data source, it looks at the data source. We might need to customize things, but if you're adding in 10, 12, 15, 20 different columns, we're not having to add or copy or paste or any of that. It generates that much faster than what we can. So there are advantages to using a form over a patch, even if we've got more control over what's going on directly with a patch. So here I'm updating the product category for an item based upon the value from the drop down box and the text input for the image URL as well. Now the toggle itself is just there for dramatic effect, really. The controls are always there, as you can see. They're just invisible. It just makes it, again, this errs on the side of caution. If I have buttons available on the screen that a user could accidentally hit, then we're obviously going to see scenarios where people are pressing stuff accidentally. We don't want that. So from here I've got my toggle to prevent that accidental press, and then I can come in and start making my customizations. So bears versus babies, then let's change the image of this one. So let's grab a different URL. Maybe it's the wrong one. Click patch. This is then going to change to the combined knowledge logo. So I've patched that back to my data source, and we can kind of prove that as well by going to a different product screen. There it is, just at the top. So let's cancel those changes, click on combined knowledge, and it says just there, bears versus babies. So from that that gallery, no forms involved, no extra screens, just this one button was able to patch a different image off to my data source. And again, I could do the same for the actual category itself. So let's change this one to a mystery game, and let's update the logo to a different one. So we've got Sun and Moon there, a different logo from a different game, and it's changed the category as well. So if there are scenarios where forms won't fit, they're too big or they're not compatible with what you're trying to achieve, then we also do have patch available for us as well. Now another scenario that is one of my favorites is when we are trying to put information from one scenario into a different data source, a non-related data source. How do we go about doing that? Now this again is a callback to a previous video where we did go more in depth into the specifics around this scenario, but the scenario itself is very relevant to what we're doing here. Essentially, we've got an appraisal system. So on this appraisal system, we have a singular list. We only have one list available for us to store data in, and in this list we have a table of information. We're actually storing rows and rows of records within a singular column. It's a multi-line column, and essentially what we're doing is we're breaking that information out, we're splitting it out, and we're creating our own little miniature data source inside of our list. It's a great way of compressing the number of lists that we need, particularly if there are security issues around the data as well. But essentially, if we go onto our list here, we've got a number of different persons, and they've got an appraisal within this list, and we've also got a number of different objectives linked to these appraisals. So if we click through onto one of these appraisals, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, we've got a gallery showcasing these appraisals. Now this information isn't being stored in a list. This information isn't being stored anywhere that I can physically grab it. We have to work this out. And again, the specifics on how we figure that out are in our YouTube channel video, the one we did back in August, I believe. So what's actually going on? Well, on this screen we have a hidden form. So on screen number 2 we've got a hidden form. Form number 2, as you can see there, is hidden. The Save Objectives button, not only does it work out exactly what the objectives column data needs to look like, but what it does is it just updates and submits form number 2. So let's have a look at form number 2. Form number 2 can be switched on here. So when we press save, what it's actually doing is it's submitting this form. So the users are not seeing this. They're seeing the interaction that we've got going on here. I can edit this appraisal and say record training plus videos. I'm going to change that one to completed and save it. It's updated my record, it's updated my status, and then when I click save and I go back through, record training plus videos has changed to green. It's completed. So where's all that information coming from if it's not stored in its own data source? Well, what happens is on our hidden form here that you see, because the Save Objectives is submitting this form, we've got this field. We've got this text field just here. This text field is storing a string of information. So essentially what this means is our field is being updated before we save. So just like you see on the Save Objectives button, we're updating this value and then we're submitting this form. So this return value is being referenced as our value. If we open this up onto see if I can remember off the top of my head now, onto, there it is, onto the default value for our field. This field is being used, well, lots of clicking around, there you go. Data card value 3 from our data card is being used to update our data source. So when I press save, it's taking the current status of everything, it's rolling all that information up, and it's submitting a form. But again, that user doesn't know that that's going on behind the scenes. Rather than using a patch where I've got to control lots of things, all I needed to do in this scenario was populate the right fields with the right information and let the form handle all of those issues. Now, what could those issues be? As we've seen, when we've been clicking through and submitting forms, we've been pinged off to the wrong location. Errors have been popping up in the wrong places. It doesn't seem to be operating as you'd expect. And again, this is all down to a form's properties. And it's back to those last 3 properties that you see down here at the bottom of the screen: on success, on reset, and on failure. What these essentially do is instruct the app, instruct the form on what to do next should any of these items occur. Now what we're expecting is on success, and what a lot of people do mistakenly as well from time to time is, if I go back to my button here, I think I've actually set that one up on this case. Here we've got our save button, and on my save button I've got submit form. I'm going to reset it back to a view form, and then I'm going to reset the form for good measure. Now what happens if I come into my form and I go, yeah, that one's fine. Oh, I'm just going to change that and click save. We get an error, and things aren't great. It's gone to the wrong place. I would prefer to be instructed that I've got an error so I can fix it first. Now that's because on my button, if you notice, the player's value is reset now, even though I cleared it. And that is because our buttons just do what they're told. the functions will happen in order. So it will submit the form, it will change it to view form, and then it will reset it, regardless of what's going on. What I should do is take these two functions, so I've cut them out, select my form, so not the button itself, but the form. And fortunately, they're at the top of the screen here under the Advanced tab. We've got on success, on reset, and on fail. I should place this in the on success. So if it successfully saves my data, I'll then perform these actions. I've then got two other options, on reset and on fail. So what happens if we reset, and then what happens if we fail as well. So let's try that again in the wild. So we've got a number of players here. Let's cancel this. Let's restart the process. 2.5. Let's get rid of this. Click save. Great stuff. I'm now being directed to the error rather than pushed off and not sure. I mean, you've got to rely on your users concentrating and seeing that message pop up at the top of the screen. If they don't, then you're going to run into a few issues. So this is why these three properties are really important. And I see this a lot of the time where users are submitting a form and then lots of actions are being performed after it. But there's a big assumption that that data, that action, is going to be correct. That issues are not going to be available. And so if there are issues, you start running into big problems because what you're expecting and what the users of the app are expecting isn't what's happening. So the properties that we have here, the on success, the on reset, and the on fail, these control what happens in these non-ideal scenarios. So if you have, and I think I've got it on another button just down here as well, for example, edit screen, we've got our save changes button, exactly the same scenario here. It makes sense, oh, I'm pressing this button, this is what I want to happen. But realistically, I should only do all of these items if this form successfully saves. So let's change that, put them in there. So this one will actually navigate me away, providing there's no issues. So let's go back. Let's click new item. Let's do all of this. Let's see what happens when we do description. Click save. Aha, it's picked up description. Hey. So it's picked up description now, and minimum age is also highlighting as well. And again, I've not been pinged off. I've not been sent to the wrong screen. I can see and understand. Oh, there's a few problems going on here. I just need to fix this. Save. Off we go. We've added our new record to the bottom of the screen, just down here. No problems, no issues. And it's really down to these three properties that are often overlooked. And there are obviously a number of different actions that you might want to perform during reset. Maybe a reset happens and we need to change a few values, or there are a couple of controls linked to your form but not actually controlled by your form. You could perform functions on the reset for those, and what to happen during the failure. So what will occur when a form fails during the update of a data source, such as mandatory fields not being populated. We can even maybe put up a pop-up banner, or maybe even send an email. Whatever the reason, we can actually perform different actions. But subsequently, all successful actions should be placed on the on success property for that form that we're submitting. If obviously you've got some buttons out there that are submitting your forms, would definitely recommend checking that out. If you've been having any issues or errors or problems with the data, it's definitely down to that scenario. So someone has just pinged up a question. Does the clear form action stop old data displaying when the user submits and clicks back in the app? One thing I found in testing is that users sometimes see old or irrelevant data for records. Aha, this is a great question, Jordan. This is actually back to my example earlier on, where we were split across multiple screens. The reason that your interaction there is causing that delay. So what Jordan's experiencing there is, let's edit a record. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to exactly replicate it because my app is nice and it's minimal. There's not too much going on, so it operates very fast. But if your form or your app has got a few things to load, obviously the actions that we perform are in sequence. So My save button, for example, for my form, we've moved it now. These functions happen in the order that they are occurring. And so if this action takes longer than this one, my reset action won't happen until after the other one has performed. So there can be delays. And what we tend to see is I'm on record for Wingspan, I click save, and just before the screen navigates me away, it changes and I see a completely different set of information. And this makes people panic because it makes them think my data's not saved, there's a problem, there's an error. It's just not ideal. The reason for this, and it's back to our item property of our form. The reason for this is because you are probably referencing a gallery or a data table. Because you're referencing to a control, what happens when we click buttons and we go off screen and we click resets and clears and things like that is when a gallery is not being interacted with, it will default the selection to the first item in the gallery. So the first item in the gallery is actually what you're seeing flash up in your form before you're navigated away. That's because when we did the cleared form or the reset actions, whichever one you've used, it's clearing that information, which is clearing it from the gallery that it's associated with. But a gallery will always have one item selected, and it's always the first item, which again is another reason why on this screen, for example, we've got let's click cancel. What we can do quickly, I appreciate it's a little bit late, let's quickly save and quit this so we can see this in action. So we've come out of that now. Let's go back into the product list app. So we're coming into this clean. So what we're expecting to see is our gallery load up for the first time and our form load up for the first time. And as a result, it's going to select one of those items. It can't not have a value selected. There you go. So the item for our form, just to confirm this as well, if we click on the form itself, is gallery1.selected. So gallery1.selected, and we can even test this as well with a label control. Let's put this on the screen, and again, gallery1.selected is a record, so I need to tell it what information I want. So I'll call it name. It will always have the first item selected regardless of what you do. So when you're using gallery.selected in your item for your form, it will clear that down, select the first value, but because of those delayed actions in your PowerFX formulas, you temporarily see an unexpected behavior. To fix that, you would need the what I've used on my edit screen 2. So edit screen 2 is using a variable item var product selected. So what I do on my save changes, not on my save changes, on the success of my form, is that what I could do here is I could do set var product selected or selected product blank. So I clear that information out. Now what that means is if I let's go back to here. So that's actually a key point. I haven't interacted with this gallery yet. Gallery 1_1 is it? This gallery, yeah, 1_1. When I select it on select, I set var selected product to this item. The one that I'm clicking on is the one that I want. So it's setting that into my variable. Now, if I take that and place that onto my edit screen, and again, if we put that into a label, and we'll do exactly the same as we did on the other screen, var selected product dot name is blank. So that's the difference between using a gallery and a variable. You get a better interaction. So not only can you now have more screens interacting with that variable because there's no dependencies, but also you can change that and go back to this form. So this screen now becomes multifunction. You don't need a form to add new. You don't need a form to edit an old record or edit a record, but with these fields missing, you can put some logic around there as well. But what we can do with this, when we click save, bear in mind I haven't got a record selected. If I select a record now, it's got Exploding Kitten set, as it says just there at the top. So that's why you that's why you're seeing that there, Jordan. So yeah, thanks very much there, Chris. Yes, the recording will be up on YouTube. We're actually going to be finishing now in the next few minutes anyway. So thanks very much for joining us. But yeah, that's all I've got, everybody, on making most of your forms within Power Apps. Obviously, do check out the uploaded content on our YouTube channel. It will be on there in the next few days. So if you need to recap over anything, do check that out as well. Just to kind of a couple of things to kind of finish us off. Obviously, if you are interested in any additional training or any help with any of your power-ups or anything like that, we do some consultancy work here as well. Do contact us on sales@combine-knowledge.com as well. We can help you out with things. We can get you on the right path. We can get you moving along much quicker. But do check out our Power Apps training, Power Automate training, as well as the rest of the suite of products, SharePoint, Online, etc. And again, reminder, we do have the winter workshops coming up where we're going to be looking at the model-driven apps and Power FX, as well as AI Builder as well. So what I'm going to get you guys to do, for those of you that have managed to stick around, I do appreciate we've gone a little bit over our estimated time as well. If you can just put into the questions area the hashtag forms onto the question, I'll put your names into a hat. I'll take your emails, put them into a hat, and we've got a random generator that will pull them out. And yeah, you'll hopefully receive an email with a voucher code for £50 in your email box this afternoon. But again, thank you very much for joining us on that. Yeah, check out our YouTube channel and other items on our website. We've got lots of exciting content on there at the moment. So thanks very much, guys. Have a good evening.